Hello YouTube, this is Stan from Stanny G Tech, and finally I am back with new tutorials and stuff. The reason I haven't been posting, I know I posted 3 tutorials and then I was off for a good almost a year, was because my license for a Visual Studio that I had has expired, and it was given to me through school. So the license has expired, and of course I didn't have a Visual Studio to reinstall. But finally, I got a copy of Visual Studio. Now it's my copy. Now I'm responsible for it. Now I'm paying for it month to month. And we're going back to our. We're gonna continue with our basics of computer programming. But before I start this class, I want to give more shout outs to more people. And actually, those are going to be the instructors who helped me throughout my struggles in understanding programming. And actually, they opened my eyes on things. So, the one professor I mentioned was Professor Chris Pascucci. So, again, Professor Pascucci, if you're watching it, big shout out to you. Thanks for teaching me, all that I need to be able to program. Now my eyes are open. Now I see the programming. Now I see the algorithms and everything. Also, big shout out to another professor who helped me, Dr. Frank Friedman. So, and big shout out to him. And if you're at Temple, if you're wondering, and if you're thinking about taking some computer classes and programming classes, I would definitely suggest Professor Pascucci and Professor Frank Friedman, as well as Ala Ojaj. I would say he was the professor that actually taught me Java. So, and you would be able to see some Java tutorials on here once we are done with this one. But the thing is that, as I said in the beginning, maybe I said it, maybe I didn't, that Java is slightly different than C#. It's a little bit, C#, if you see, as you see that C# has, the Visual Studio provides the GUI interface, which is graphical user interface. And you can create buttons and all that stuff, and you just, click on the button and it does the code for you. Java is a little bit, you have to write code in Java, but it's not, the syntax is not that different. There are if statements, there are loops, there are, the whatever, print line. In this case, we have a show message box.show, right? And in fact, we're going to be talking about loops today. So we talked about last time. We talked about the decision making, the if statements. This class, we're gonna cover loops, basically. So as you remember in if statements, and I forgot to mention that. Well, when I go through this tutorial, I'll show you something that I forgot to mention regarding loops. Regarding the if statements. But basically, if you remember if statements, if statement can validate certain value, and then according to whatever it validates, it gives you the answer. So it's like a decision making. So it's like, if the color is green, the car can move. If the color is yellow, the car should stop. If the color is red, the car cannot move and should wait till the color is green again. So they're decision making. But sometimes, however, in coding, there are certain decisions that repeat over and over and over and over again. Imagine you have a store, right? And you're looking for a particular item in the store. And you want to write we're not talking about coding right now, but we're talking about the situation, right? And if I say, well, enter Best Buy store, for example, and if you find this TV, give it to a customer. If you don't find this TV, exit Best Buy store. Now enter Best Buy store, and if you find this computer, give it to a customer. So in other words, you're repeating the same code, the same process over and over again. So part of the process is the same thing, right? And probably you're thinking about, like, if I'm writing a code for a particular application, like, and so far I know if statements, so I can use if statements. But if I do, like, validate a certain, or if I do search for certain thing, or if I do evaluate certain value, it's going to be, if the value is this, displayed, else if the value is this, displayed, else if the value is this, displayed, else if the value is this, displayed, and so forth, so forth. And it's going to be like maybe 5 if statements, maybe 15 if statements, maybe 20 if statements for the same exact operation. So you think about it, is there a way to automate those things? Now, that's where the loops come handy. So we're going to be talking about the loops, all right? So then we're going to talk about a purpose of loops, where I already kind of mentioned that, right? So then we're going to be talking about different loop types, such as count-controlled loops and event-controlled loops. So first of all, let's talk about loops. And I already actually started talking about the loops. So loop is basically what it sounds like, a loop. You basically go in circles. You continuously go in circles until you reach a certain condition, like until the certain condition is specified, right? So imagine you're going in your car and your car spins, the wheel spins, right? Or you're going on a bike and the spins multiple n number of times, or x number of times, whatever you're gonna call it, until you come to the stop at a certain point. So you start spinning the wheel, and you repeat the same process. You push the pedals, left pedal, right pedal, left pedal, right pedal, and the wheel spins until you come to the store. Let's say it's maybe a mile or a couple, feet away, maybe 100 feet, maybe 200 feet away. You do the same operation until you come to the store. So that's what the loop is, right? So, in technical terms, we see that the loop is a sequence of instructions that is repeated over and over again until a certain condition is established. Exactly what we talked about, right? So now, what's the loop's purpose? Well, one of the loop's purpose is to reduce repeating the same code over and over again. So I already talked about that, right? So you can automate. You can put one little statement, one little loop, and then we'll automate all those if statements. Instead of rewriting if, it will just do it. You just set the parameter and it will just do it as many times as you need it till the certain, till the certain condition is reached, right? Accomplished. So. And to automate the process or sequence, right? So I already talked about that too. I already spoiled it. So this is the graphical or schematic representation of what the loop statement does and how it looks like. So first of all, in coding, you have initialization. So you pretty much declare the variables, you initialize them. You just set it to 0 or set. So basically, it's like you set your GPS in the car, or you set, okay, so it's gonna take me, or you set the timer. So it's gonna take me 5 minutes to go from point A to point B. So if I travel those 5 minutes, I'm gonna be on time. If I travel those 5 minutes and make this distance, I'm gonna be on time. I'm not gonna be late. So pretty much you set the amount of times the loop is running, and then you initialize any value that you need. Pretty much, we're going to be covering. Basically, we're going to be talking about such thing as counter. When we talk about count control loops and event control loops, and probably is going to become clearer. So first you have an initialization. Sorry. So you initialize your values, variables rather, and stuff like that. Then you have a condition statement. So basically, a condition statement is like a if statement, but you're gonna say, in this case, for example, this is a for loop, right? So you're gonna say for this value, if the value is less than whatever thing, do this operation. Or if the value is more, then do this operation. Or if the value is equal to this, do this operation. Whatever, you'll see this in the future. So a condition could be true or a condition could be false. So we know that from the if statements class. The condition could be true, which condition could be met, or not. So in this case we have true or false. You can see this is a false. What's going to happen when the condition is false? It's going to just exit the loop. And that's how you exit the loop. You need to dissatisfy the condition to exit the loop. So, or satisfy it. But if the condition is true, it's going to go straight to the loop statement. So let's say you set your counter, number to. So you're gonna say, if I set the amount of times I looked for this particular thing, I looked 5 times. All right, and the loop allows you only to run it 5 times. Then you're going to be at the dead end. So it's going to say, no, the condition is false, and it's going to drop out the loop, even if it didn't find anything, right? So now the condition is true. It's going to go and do the loop, right? It's going to go, okay, if it's 0, it's going to run 1 time. It's going to do 1 iteration. So if it finds it, it will say, oh, I found it. If not, then he's going to go again, and again, and again, to whatever amount of times you set in here, in this initialization, right? So, and then once it finds it, it's gonna step. So it's gonna step right into it, and it's gonna say, "Oh, okay, I found it." Now, sometimes the condition could, if it steps in here, it goes back to the condition, it validates it, and it updates the number, right? So let's say it goes through, it tries to find something, right? It's a loop statement. It tries to find something. It verifies here. If everything is true, it goes to find something, right? And if let's say it didn't find something, or through the first iteration, it goes here, says, ooh, okay, step number 1, didn't find anything, so let's go to the condition, update the amount of steps. So now it's a second step. It's going to go through again. It's going to verify it. It's going to go through, do the loop statement, go step again, then it's going to go back and so forth. It's going to loop. So that's why it's called a loop, right? Now, once the condition is, if the condition is false, it's just going to drop out the loop and it's going to say, no, it's not working. No, it's, So that's what this diagram basically means. I'm gonna show it on hands-on when we're gonna do our little project. Okay, let's go forward and we're gonna cover different loop types. So in this case, we're gonna look at the count controlled loop. You're gonna say, what does it mean, count control? Well, that means exactly what it sounds like. Count control loop. So the type of loop that runs until a certain value of a counter is reached. So as I said, you set it, you say, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes looking for this thing. If I find it, great. If I don't find it, well, my 5 minutes are up and I have to either postpone it or try another time or something. Or if I'm going to try calling this office 5 times. If I call them 5 times, nobody answers, I'm going to just stop calling and say, well, make it a day, I'm going to call tomorrow. So until a certain criteria. So you depend on the counter, basically. So the count control loops are basically for loops. And here's an example of a for loop. Oops. So in this example, we see the counter, as I said, we'll set it to 5, for example, right? So I'm saying, okay, so this is going to be the integer, of course, because it's a whole number, so it's going to be a 5. So I set it set my count, set my amount of looping five times. So it's gonna loop 5 times, right? So then I have a for, and I'm gonna have my condition right up to, oopsies. Okay, going back. Right up to this word, right after up to counter, is going to be my condition. So my condition is for integer, which is going to be a counting operation. So I call the integer I. Well, whatever the operation is going to count, so it's going to be the integer. So integer I, which is initial integer, right, equaling to 0. So I initialize here, right? So it's initialized to 0. So it's like it's like you want to count how long will it take to walk from point A to point B. You take your cell phone, you open up the stopwatch, and you set it to 0. And then when you start going, when you start walking or driving, whatever, you push the start button and it starts counting, right? So that's basically what this is, right? So it's as long as I, which is this number, is less than or equal to a counter. So I want to include this fifth iteration, right? So as long as this condition is true, if this condition is true, I'm going to jump and do the operation, whatever the operation could be. Once the operation is finished, I want to make sure I update my counter that it did once, that it ran once. Okay, so I want to do a counter, or not counter, but this guy, the integer, the iteration thing. I want to update it to 1, right? So I do this integer plus plus. So it's gonna say, aha, I ran 1 time. All right, now I'm gonna do the second iteration. So it's true. Okay, 2 is less than or equal to 5, so it's less than 5 in this thing. So I'm going to do this iteration again. I'm going to do this operation. Okay, no good. All right, so I ran it 2 times now. I update this. 2 plus 1 is going to be 3. So this is the 3rd time I'm running. So now it's 3. 3 is less than 5, so it's still true. Okay, I'm running this operation. So I'm running it and so forth until it reaches 5. If 5 is reached, if this integer goes to 5, phi equals to 5. So now the criteria, the counter is 5, so it's reached here, and it's gonna drop out the loop. It's not gonna do the iteration anymore. It's gonna drop out the loop with some result, like I didn't find the item, or the inventory is empty, or whatever the condition might be, right? So that depends on the counter. So that's why it's called count control loop. Now we're going to be talking about the event control loop. Let me close the window because the airplanes will distract us, okay? So now we're going to be talking about event control loops. So unlike count control loops, the event control loops rely fully on the event that's happening. So let's see this, okay? A type of loop that runs until a certain event is happening. So if you remember, the count control loop is the type of loop that runs until a certain counter is what is it? Count control loop. It runs until a certain value of a counter is reached. This guy runs until a certain event is happening. So normally they're while and do while loops. Okay, so if you see those words, you know it's event control loops. All right. So an example of event control loops will be this guy. It's pretty much the same operation as last time, but what's going to be different in this operation, the initialization is going to happen before of this guy. You know, this guy who runs and does the job, right, is going to be set to 0. Not in the condition. So we'll basically bring it out, we'll set it to 0, and we'll bring the counter and set it to 5, right? Now I'm saying while, the I, which is this guy, is less than a counter. Now do some event, right? Do some operation, and then update my I, update my iteration, update it, say you ran once, the event happened once, and then goes back, and it says checks in here again. It says, okay, the event ran once, so I still have 4 more. Since the calendar is still 5, so I still have 4 more. Okay, let's do this event again. All right, and then gonna check again, update this I again. So the I is gonna be equivalent to 2 now. So it's gonna validate again, run the event. So it runs, and it runs, and it runs, and it runs until a certain event is running. That's gonna keep the loop alive, right? Okay, so then another event control loop is gonna be a do while loop. So we can see here. Go back. All right. No, go back. All right. Go back, I said. All right, here we go. So now we can see do while loop. It's pretty much not that much different. It's still event control loop, but the do while loop basically you initialize the same thing as in the while loop. You initialize everything up front, and then you go into do some operation and do the update of the I while this thing. I'm sorry. While this thing is happening. So while this event is happening, just to do the do this operation. So basically, what's the difference, you ask me? Well, what's the difference between while and do while loops, right? So here it is. So basically, a while versus do while loop. A while loop will only execute if a condition evaluates to true, and that's true, because it checks the condition first, as we saw, and then it runs the event, right? And do while loop executes immediately without evaluating the condition. So if we go back on our slides here, and we'll look on a while loop, right? So we'll look into while loop, and it says while this condition is true, while it's true that the I is less than the counter or equals than the counter, right? While it's less than the counter, we're gonna do this. So it checks it. Now in this, it's gonna do this without checking it. It's gonna do this. It's gonna prioritize to do something while that's true. So it's gonna immediately jump in and do the operation, and then it's gonna worry about this. Then it's gonna worry about, because this is gonna be updated. It's gonna worry about this thing. All right. So normally I would say do while loops are used in games. So imagine you making a tic-tac-toe game, and then you want the users to be able to run the game, and continue playing the game, restart the game, whatever, while the user didn't click the exit button, or the user didn't close the application or something, right? So you want to do this over and over and over and over and over again, right? You don't have to write for each game start. You don't have to say game number 2 start, do this code. Game number 3 start, do this code. So you simply write a do while loop, which does it. So while loops are basically used. No, you can use the while loop while the condition is true. You do some event, right? So you evaluate, you make sure it's true, and then you do it, right? While the supplies last, or while the inventory lasts, you keep on saying, okay, there's still more items available, you can buy it, whatever it is, right? So now there's one more loop that I'm missing in this slide, but we can fix one of the loops, and I can show you this. Something that's called infinite loop. Now, I'm not sure where actually you would use one of those, but that's actually the mistake people do, and their program just keeps on giving them not really the outcome you want. But how do you build a, let's see, if you look on this and you kind of think about how can you make the infinite loop, out of this loop. So we know that in fact that it relates on a counter. So while it's less than 5, it's gonna keep on running. When it equals to 5, it's gonna drop out, right? So the whole thing lies in here, in this kind of condition. So if you say, for example, for integer I equals to 0, for I greater than 5, right? Something like that. For I greater than 5, run the loop. So it's basically the infinite loop is it's not gonna go to the certain barrier. It's gonna keep on running. It's greater than 5. Is 6 greater than 5? Yes. Is 7 greater than 5? Yes. Or greater than 0, let's say. Okay, so counter is 0, let's say. And then you say, if it's greater than 0, run it. So it's going to run and run and run. 100 is greater than 0. 1,000 is greater than 0. 1,000,000 is greater than 0. And so forth. It's going to keep on running, right? And another thing, if you do the minus, right, in here. So if you say, if I is in this condition, if I put minus here, right, it's gonna do minus 1. So it's gonna say 0. 0 is less than 5. I'm gonna run it, right? I'm gonna run it one time. -1. -1 is less than 5. True. So I'm gonna keep on running this. Now it's gonna update it to, so it's -1 minus 1. So -2. So -2 is less than 5, and it's gonna keep on running. So you're gonna watch out what you put here. All right. What signs you put here. And that's really important, because if it turns the infinite loop, it's going to keep on running. Sometimes you would need to kill the program when it happens, because the program will just run until you shut down the computer or exit the application by yourself, right? It's going to fill up your memory. So that's basically it about loops. Let me make sure that I covered everything. Yes, I did. I covered this. Oh, I didn't cover something else. So, nested loops, all right? So, I didn't talk about this in if statements, but if statements also could be nested. All right, so pretty much what that means is you can have if statement within the if statement. So if I come to the Best Buy store, all right, that's one if statement. If it has computers, I can buy one. If it doesn't, sorry, I will go to Walmart, right? So pretty much you have a main thing, right? You have a main if, and then you have ifs under it. So it's going to be a nested if, pretty much. So if let's think of a program. If the condition is true, right? Certain condition is true. If I'm at the right point, right? Whatever. If the value of x is this, then give me the reply. If not, then evaluate, then find it, whatever, right? So if within the if. Same thing happens with the nested loops, right? You can have a loop within a loop. So you can have a main loop running around to a certain thing, right? and then you have the internal loop doing its own thing. So that's why you have two variables here. You have the I, which is responsible for first loop, outside loop. You can see the curly brackets represent that outside loop. And you can have another for loop inside looking for that specific thing within here. So let's say this loop looks for the store, right, that sells computers. And this loop looks for the specific computer in that store. So it looks for, let's say, it finds Best Buy, and then it goes through Best Buy's, the inventory, and finds if it sells HP or Dell or whatever you specify the computer, right? So in order not to run two loops, you can run one loop and just do the whole, to kill two birds in one shot, basically what it is, right? So pretty much that's it for this slide-wise tutorial. And now we're gonna go into hands-on. So basically we're gonna start our Visual Studio. And by the way, I'll show you the new 2019 Visual Studio. It starts a little bit different. Now I did a couple demos here, but I'm gonna start a new project and we're gonna start from scratch. So in this one I start creating a new project, right? And you see it displays here, you can specify the filters. You can specify that we're doing C#, that we're doing Windows, and platform the platform would be Office, Other Services, Test. What we're doing here? I didn't select Windows, that's why. Windows. Desktop here. All right. So in desktop, we select Windows Forms, right? So we're gonna name our application. I'm gonna name it a loops. All right. So loops. Click create. And then from that point, it's going to be the same thing as we are all familiar with from the previous version. And so for this one, I would say we need a button. So, okay, there you go. There's our button. And we're gonna, of course, name it. We're gonna write the text run, for example, because this is gonna be a run. And one more thing we need to do, we need to name the objects correctly. So we need to use the correct naming here is btn run, as we covered in first couple classes, right? So btn run. So that's pretty much all we need. Make sure it's btn, not mtn. I'm not drinking Mountain Dew right now. BTN. Alright. Joking about Mountain Dew. Alright. In fact, I might have some Mountain Dew. But anyways, that's going to be later. So now, we think about this. So, what kind of loops can we do? Let's do a for loop. Alright, so let's think about this. Let's write a program that's going to display us our number of tries. You know, that I, remember that I, the integer I. That's number of tries. So the counter is going to be set to certain fixed value, right? And it's going to run a certain amount of tries. And the I thing is going to be displayed what try is it on. Like is the first iteration, second iteration, third iteration, fourth iteration, fifth iteration, sixth iteration, whatever. Right? So to code that, we're going to go behind the run button. Click event, right? It's going to generate some code for us. And we're going to start. So looking back on the slide, if you go through the slides, we need a certain counter, right? So int counter, we're going to set it to, let's set it to 5 or 7. Doesn't really matter. Right? Of course. 7. All right. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. Of course, it's never used, right? So now we're gonna set int. No, that's it. So this is a for loop, right? So we set the counter to 7. So now we're gonna write the for loop. If you remember the form correctly, we write for. That's a keyword, right? For. And then we open up our parentheses, and as you see, the program is gonna create those parentheses for us. And we're gonna type in our condition, right? The condition is gonna be for int I equal to 0 at the starting point, right? Then we write our validation statement. So if I is gonna be less than or equal to 5, no, equal to counter, which is in this case 7, right? So counter. So then it's going to run some code and update our I guy, right? So called, right? So then what kind of operation we're gonna do is we're gonna show the message box. Alright, so now we need to show the value of I, and if you remember, if we set the variable to the integer value, it stores itself, and it's stored in memory, but there's no graphical representation of that, so we need to convert it to string, right? So we say in the parentheses, let's say convert dot to string, right? And we're what are we converting to string? We're converting the I to string, right? So this is gonna be our operation. So now that's pretty much it for the for loop with the I. Now if we run this application, sorry. So let's run this application. So we see it's at 0 because I is 0, right? And we click OK and it's gonna run. Alright. So now it ran one time. So the value of I is 1. Second time, the value of I is 2. Third time, the value of I is 3. Fourth time, the value of I is 4. Fifth time, the value of I is 5. Sixth time, the value of I is 6. And because we set it to equals to 7 as well, it's going to be the value of I is 7. Now, if we click one more time, it's going to drop out the loop. And we can see that, right? So what's going to be happening if we set this to equals counter, right? Not equals, I'm sorry. If we set this to just less than counter, right? If we set this guy to less than a counter, what's gonna happen is this. Let's run the application. So it's not gonna include the last time. So run. So 0, we're at the start. Let's go. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. This is the last value that's true because 6 is less than 7, right? Now look at this. It's just said if the I is less than a counter. Now the I is going to be equal to the counter, so it's going to drop out the loop. Watch this. It dropped out the loop. All right. So that's how the for loop works. Now, can we turn this loop, leaving the same program, leaving the same thing? Can we turn this loop into event control loop? This is a counter control loop. This relies on this counter. Can we turn this into the event control loop? Of course we can. What do we do for this? If you remember from our slides, we remove this for, and that's the first thing we do. We put the while. We change the keyword. That's the first thing we do. Right now, then what we do, we remove this initialization. It needs to be done outside, right? So under this counter, we initialize, The I, int I equal into 0. Alright, so then we're gonna update our I inside the operation. So this is what's gonna happen basically. So it's gonna go into validate this condition if it's true, right, first. And if it's true, it's gonna let it to run this guy, this line of code, right? And then it's gonna update the counter, say ran once, right? And then it's gonna go back and validate 1. So if I equals to 1, I is still less than the counter. So it's gonna go ahead and do this operation again. Just show the test box. And it's going to update the counter so it ran 2 times. Now I is 2 is still true and so forth. So let's see this in action. Since I have I is less than the counter, it's going to run only 6 times. Again, if you want to run full 7 times, you want to put less than or equal to. So let's go. Run 0. Ran once, ran twice, ran 3 times, ran 4 times, ran 5 times, ran 6 times, drop out. Right? So this is basically a while loop. Now do while, can we turn this into the do while loop? Of course. What's going to be different about this? That the operation is going to happen before. And it's going to jump in immediately to that. Without validating the condition. The condition is going to be validated at the end. So this is our condition. So we'll leave everything intact. Alright, but basically go ahead and move this. Not the good habit to cut and paste, but because you can cut the wrong thing and paste the wrong thing. I already did. So not a good suggestion. Don't do that in code, because then if you have a lot of lines of code, you're gonna break your head, and it's gonna basically it's gonna drive you nuts. Where I made this mistake was because you copied and pasted the code, right? And it's a good habit to basically write the code. So it's gonna teach you. So we have this, right? We have this basically initialization again, 2 lines. We have the state. We are updating the I. And we're doing all this operation while I is less than, let's say I is less than or equal to counter. Alright. So while this condition is true, oopsies, yeah, put this right here. While this condition is true, right? So while the game is going or something, while somebody is not clicking, while somebody is not exiting, so it's gonna do this. And we're missing one more thing. What is that? I already said it. I already gave you a hint. Keyword do. All right. So we put do in front of it, and now our loop is complete. So let's run it and test it out. So run 0, ran once, ran twice, ran 3 times, ran 4 times, ran 5 times, ran 6 times, ran 7 times because we set it to equal to counter, and then drops out. So pretty much the same operation of the loop. Now in this case, right? But under different circumstances, you can turn around. You can set the loop to work the way you want it. Like if you're running the game, obviously you don't want to say, while the user clicked exit, run this code. It's never gonna work, right? So the while in this case, you want to do it at the end. You want to run the program. You want to complete whatever it has to be completed. Run certain, search whatever it is, putting things into places while the game is still alive. While the user didn't click the exit button, or while the player is still in the game and still didn't lose the game, right? So that's when you do the do while loop. When you do the for, normally when you search, when you iterate through something, you do the for loop. You set the counter, you go to the counter control loop, you just run the loop, and it finds you the value, it returns you the value. When do you do while? While you do while this certain event is happening, you know, while this event is happening, while this condition is true, you do this operation. The condition, if the condition is not true, it's gonna end, right? If it's false. So this is basically a little representation of how the loops work. So the next lesson we're probably gonna cover classes, and because classes really enhance the programming techniques even further, because you can actually minimize the lines of code, and we're going to be talking about classes, how you can reuse the classes, what classes are in programming, and it's going to make programming that much easier for you guys. All right, so stay tuned for the other classes, for the other tutorials I'm about to post. I'm going to be posting this one tonight, and I'm going to be posting the other ones probably when I get them recorded and ready. And thank you again for watching, and thanks to all those people who helped me out through the programming and making all this possible for you guys. And I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.